Let's dive into some of these early risers and fallers, huh?
All right. Riser list, you got 5 guys listed. And essentially the guys that are rising right now or falling right now, these are guys that we're actually seeing in the playoffs for the most part. I think really completely across the board. Devin Singletary, obvious reasons. Gabe Davis, greatest wide receiver game greatest wide receiver game in the playoffs ever. Not too shabby. We're talking about Jamar Chase, of course, Cam Akers, OBJ. These are all guys that are on the up. Do you want to talk about any or all of those guys real quick?
I'd at least want to highlight some of these Bills guys, starting with Singletary, who was first on the list. Just to close out 2021, since week 14, well, one was the number 2 running back in the fantasy playoffs. But you look at the totals that this guy has had in terms of fantasy points and snap shares. I'm just going to go down it real quick. 82.7% snap share, 15 fantasy points, running back 14. Next week, week 15, 95.2% snaps, 16.6 running back 7, 71.4%, 18.8 points, running back 10, 80.8%, 23 fantasy points, running back 5, 78.5% snaps, 25.2 points, running back 3, 85.2% of snaps, 24.4 points, running back 2, and then 100% of the snaps in the crunch time in this AFC divisional round, 15.1 points, running back 4. I know that was against lesser competition, but still, looking at those finishes is insane, those totals, and especially the workload. They finally committed to an every down back. The Bills did, and we saw the results. We've always known this offense is explosive. When they finally made a guy the focal point of the backfield, top 15 every single week and top 10 in all but one of them. That's insane. Top 5 in over half of those games as well. That's just incredible. Great to see. If he leaves unscathed, now there's, of course, in that breath, they could be the first team to add a running back in the draft or one. He might not come out unscathed, but should he? I think he should go in the first 3 rounds. So if you're doing early 2022 drafts on Underdog, one of our favorite sites, code RSJ for a nice 100 deposit match if you're watching here. Ultimately, Singletary is going to be one of those guys that could yield huge value because he's going in round 6, 7. People aren't believing in it right now. And I didn't think he did anything other than show that he belongs as their focal point. And then Gabe Davis, you mentioned him, the best playoff performance of any wide receiver ever. More importantly, just like the secure role, even with Sanders, McKenzie, Beasley on the roster. 2 of those guys, Sanders and McKenzie, are unrestricted free agents. Beasley's likely to be a cap casualty. Even with those guys on the roster, he ran the most routes and most snaps other than Stephon Diggs on the team, and certainly had the most yards, most touchdowns, 204 touchdowns as well. I mean, it was insane. And just to know this guy has a huge role already with the other guys around him still there, never mind the fact that most of them are probably going to be gone because the Bills are pretty cap strapped. It's another thing to consider with Singletary. They're not going to bring in a huge name free agent at least. I think Gabriel Davis immediately vaults into that mid-round receiver conversation with a potential wide receiver. We just saw it, like the wide receiver 1 overall upside. He probably won't take over for Diggs or anything of that nature, but that's why he's in such a great spot when he can feast on the number 2 opportunity with those corners. It's just a beautiful thing. So I thought all those guys were risers. I put Cam Akers on here after a dreadful performance, not because, again, he doesn't look great right now. The 2 fumbles were abysmal, but he just saw 90% of the carries. He's clearly, recovering, but actually on the field is a great sign for his long-term health, playing 58 of the snaps compared to 14 for Sony. And again, handling 24 touches compared to just 1 for Sony. So the guy is back. He is the workhorse, and it's beautiful to see.
I know he looked rough, and those fumbles, man, the Rams tried hard to give that game away. They really worked at it. Couldn't quite get it done, but they worked at it. Cam Akers, you have him 23 on your way too early big board. I don't care what he looked like exactly. If he's healthy, that's a steal. I'm serious. Like I know you actually. I think you have him higher than the experts.
IBCR, yeah.
Yeah, I think 23rd. If this guy's running on all cylinders, late second round guy, yeah, sign me up.
Absolutely. In fact, between Darrell Henderson and Sony Michel, they combined. Obviously, they alternated between who was the running back 1, depending on injuries and the status of them. But they ultimately finished as a top 24 running back in all but I think 4 weeks. I'm just pulling it up real quick. I had tweeted it just the other day. Running back 1 in 10 of 17 games, top 20 in 11 of 17, so 65%. They accrued 240 combined fantasy points, which would have been the running back 7 on the season here. And that's Darrell Henderson and Sony Michel. You tell me Cam Akers, who before the injury was looking like the next young stud of the NFL, isn't going to be a gold mine in this offense with Matt Stafford leading charge? Oh, absolutely. Just to see that he's even out there is a blessing. Of course, Jamar Chase is just like a monster, a phenom. I was too low on him on my first draft, so I just kind of acknowledge that. And OBJ really rising that free agent stock. I'm very intrigued to see where he goes.
Yeah, likewise. I feel like there's a similar OBJ vibe when you're talking about Gabe Davis, talking about the guy who's like your number 2 receiver, and other guys getting some attention, and all of a sudden, I mean, OBJ became like a real player. It's the first time I've like thought he was a real player in like 4 years.
Yeah,
so,
it's great.
I don't know.
I like it. I mean, I
Me
know
too.
Diva tendencies, and people call him. I think he's a hard-nosed player. I really love the guy. Given he brings me a fantasy title a couple of years, back in his rookie season. So I'll always be an OBJ fanboy.
Just to be clear,
I can't wait
that wasn't a couple years ago. You're not as young as you think you are, potentially.
Yeah. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments. Check out some more videos and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.